Hello and welcome to our daily sketching routine. It is Tuesday, January 21st, 2025, and today's topic will be tentatively called From Sketch to Drawing, and it'll be part of the Drawing Comics Deep Dive theme for the week. I'm just going to make a note for myself. So yeah, the basic idea is it'll be a continuation and like all week long. Yesterday, basically taking the thumbnail and then creating a sketch, and then today I'll talk about different ways of taking a sketch and making it into like a finished drawing specifically for comics, but just in general. But before we begin, welcome back if you are returning, and welcome if you are new to the channel. I sketch and post every day, and I use timers to stay focused and to build a habit. So I'm going to start a 10-minute timer, and there's a lot of information I want to go over, and that's why it's going to take even longer than a week, but for sure I'm going to focus on it this week. So to begin with, let me just kind of go over the thumbnail. And basically I took this thumbnail and did this page, and so from yesterday's video to what I have here, you can see that it's more progress. I didn't use the exact same process, and there's a lot of other like kind of different approaches to it. These are options, and also part of it is kind of how I'm figuring out how I want to do it also. One option is basically how I'm doing it right now, which is to sketch out a thumbnail. I don't have a script, so it's a little different if you do have a script. The approach might be a little different. In this case, this is a mix of world building and concept art and storytelling. So yeah, the thumbnail and then just kind of sketching it out. Yesterday I did it in pencil. That's one way to do it. I wouldn't call this, I guess it's inking, but like it's not finished. It's sketching, but I'm just using pen and ink. And so that's something to keep in mind, is that this is not meant to be the finished drawing. So yeah, I sketched this in pencil very loosely yesterday, and so I'm going to go back in and get rid of any pencil lines, which is helpful whenever you are wanting to like ink over it. It can be kind of distracting with the pencil lines. And then the next thing is I approached this one, so I added some kind of storytelling elements, like there's a moon and stuff like that, and that's because there's no script, so I just kind of came up with whatever, which isn't a bad way to approach it. A script is also good. So yeah, like if you're just kind of because in this case I'm being sort of the writer and the artist, I approached this panel kind of similar to the previous, like the first panel, in that I can go in and sort of add like details and stuff like that, and being pretty loose about it. Like at the same time, I can scan this in, and I would probably leave the pen work, like the pen and ink parts that I like, and then just clean it up and make it look more finished and like tighter, and like add like certain details, or maybe even like special effects type stuff, that like tones or whatever. So I'm liking that. Like this is again an experiment, but I'll do another video where I do something like that. I'll scan it in and everything, but yeah, I have to be methodical about it and just kind of deep dive, as I'm calling it. So that's what I'm leaning towards, is kind of doing that kind of thing. And so what that means is that I'm not going to spend a ton of time trying to make this look finished, although, so in a way this kind of becomes, it's not a thumbnail, it's a little bit bigger than a thumbnail, but it becomes like a layout or a preliminary sketch or something like that. So yeah, so that's one approach, and I kind of did that over here too. And so in yesterday's video I talked wanted to kind of have a silhouette of the cottage. And again, it's kind of concept art also, since I haven't designed these things, and so it's really helpful, especially with like a really big like world building project too, because it involves comics and illustrations and novels and stuff like that. So it's good to have something. I'm sort of mapping out like the whole project. So the next thing I want to go over is different approaches. So this is just kind of what I'm doing. Since I've been making these videos in my sketchbook, I just stuck with that because it's was easiest. Another way to do it, which I'm not going to do, but I've done it before, which is to get a sheet of like Bristol paper. So this is, I forget the exact dimensions, but then you would, I mean, they also make comic book pages, like pre-formatted or whatever. And then you could just make a bigger page than this. So this is about 2 or 3 times. So this is kind of the traditional. Again, that's not like what I'm going to do, but I've done it where you have the bigger page and then you would still have the thumbnail. But if I were going to do it that way, I wouldn't necessarily do this part. That's kind of why I wanted to show this, talk about this, is because I wouldn't go through the trouble of doing this, because one, it's the wrong like size. So even though this panel is pretty big, relatively speaking, it's still, that would be like, it wouldn't even fill like the first part here. So I'm not going to do that because that's a lot of work. And yeah, it's not that it would never get done. It would just take too long. And so you have to kind of think about stuff like that. You have to kind of make these compromises, because it's not that it wouldn't be beautiful or like you couldn't do it. It's just, if I were to do this panel on this paper, it would take me forever. So it's just stuff like that you kind of have to think about. Now, I have like decent, I call it decent, like medium quality printer paper. Like, it's pretty good. I mean, even this paper that I'm using in the sketchbook is basically printer paper, and it's okay. Like, it doesn't look bad. And if you get paper that's a little bit better, like slightly better, like the ink looks pretty good. The other thing is, I don't necessarily want my comic page layouts to be in a sketchbook, because I might want to move it around and like scan it. It's easier to scan on a loose paper. That would be most likely what I would do. Like, I would just have thumbnails and then basically do what I'm doing here, but it would be on like printer paper. The other thing, and this isn't just for comics, but it's helpful, is that you can use tracing paper. So I have this big pad of tracing paper, so I have to like cut it into a smaller piece. And this, I'll bring this up again. I brought it up a few videos ago about how to like transfer images, pictures, and I'll bring it up again because I also want to do like larger scale like paintings on canvas and stuff, or even on like that Bristol paper. And so part of this has to do with how to transfer drawings onto like a different surface. And so you may have already seen examples of this where you would like get the drawing and then like the sketch, so just trace over it and then put lead on the back or graphite and then just draw it onto like a different surface. So that's a kind of a separate topic, but like that's one thing to do. But even if you weren't like doing that, for example, one thing could be, let's say that this could be a good example. So in this panel, I just wanted to have something. So I just wanted to go from like the thumbnail to basically I'm calling it like, well, it's the sketch or like the layout sketch. And it's okay for that. I mean, I'm not looking at this and thinking this is a finished drawing for like a comic. I feel like it's a little unfinished looking. But like, since it's in my sketchbook and everything, I'm not gonna sit here and try to make this into like a finished illustration in the sketchbook. But if there are things that I like about it, and this isn't just for comics, this is also like if you're coming up with designs and stuff, the drawing process is separate from like the creative or concepting process of it. So the creative part is sort of figuring out like, what would this cottage look like zoomed out? Like, that's the creative part of it. But then the drawing part of it could be, so I'm just going to use this piece of tracing paper. So the creative part of it could just be needing and this is also part of like the production process. So it could be just needing the silhouette of it, for example. So one good thing about this is that, one, I don't have to exactly redraw it. It's a way of figuring out the design of something. Because the creativity is different than like the drawing process. Because you could trace anything, really. I don't recommend tracing. I mean, if you're studying, you can trace whatever you want. If the goal is to learn how to draw, it's going to be a crutch. I mean, that's my opinion. Like, I pretty much went through it also. But yeah, like when I was learning, I would just kind of trace over stuff also. But I think sometimes people think, well, this will be my shortcut or something, but it's going to kind of bite you. But anyway, that's like that's just my opinion. I mean, I'm gonna scan things in, so I'm not like opposed to, and I'm not opposed to like doing this either. So the point is that you can work out like stuff. You can kind of check like the shapes and stuff, and on top of that you can even check it on the back. So this is not a bad way to learn, by the way. So just as an example, I can do like, it's not a bad way to figure out like if your drawing is in proportion and whatnot, or like what you would change. So this would be like, I'll kind of talk about this panel a little bit. So one, hold on. So you can check your proportion this way. To see if like the drawing is in proportion, which it is. So that's one way. It's another way to like figure out the design. Now obviously digitally this is what layers are, but I think it's good to be able to do it by hand also, or traditionally. I mean, ultimately it doesn't really matter. It's just these are ideas and options, and it may be new to you. So this is one way of like figuring out or coming up with different versions of things. Then the next thing, I don't currently have a light box. I used to have one, would be to do that, and then you would take your drawing and then light box it. So put this on a light box and then transfer it onto like the better paper. So those are just some different ways of approaching it. But just to kind of repeat what I was saying earlier, it's if I were doing like a thumbnail and I was going to put it on like a, and this is kind of a topic for another video, but I wouldn't do this and then try to redraw it again on a, like in a bigger size. I would just draw it in the bigger like size. So the other thing might be, the question might be, well, when do you ink it? When do you like pencil it? So everything that I'm doing on here that's in ink could just be done in pencil. And that's kind of like why I saved this panel like this. You could actually just do all of it, like map it out like in pencil, and that would be fine. So yeah, the reason that I'll sometimes just do it in ink is because sometimes that's my preferred way of doing it. So you can see here, if I'm still figuring something out, like when I do it in ink, it might become overworked kind of quickly. But sometimes that's like, for me, like the best way to brainstorm an idea is to just draw it and then make adjustments. But yeah, if I want to know more detail, I would find ways of figuring out the detail. And I wouldn't necessarily sit there and try to make this sketch into like a finished picture, basically. So the other thing I'll talk about, so yeah, here it's just like, let's say I want to add some stuff going on back here. I can just kind of sketch it in, and that's basically what I would be doing with a pen. So stuff like that, you can just keep adding detail with pencil, and that's fine. I will say that, like, let's say I'm doing it like this, I wouldn't try to make it look finished, but I would put all the important stuff. So basically whatever the line work is, and that's kind of like kind of deserves its own video. The other thing, so in this panel, I'll just kind of go over it. So I went ahead and inked like the borders of the panels, and that helps because since I knew what was going to be inside of them, I went ahead and inked it. I'll talk about like the story a little bit. So from the thumbnail to like the sketch here, I started adding more narrative elements. So I didn't actually thumbnail like the raven flying towards the cottage, so I just made it do that. I also didn't thumbnail the raven going up to the window as we zoom into the cottage, so I added that. And that's why it's kind of good to have like the preliminary art. I find that if I were to take this and try to put it on like this nice piece of paper and it's like draw it larger and stuff, it's a lot more work, and I'm more cautious about what I do because I don't want to mess up or something. That's kind of why I'm doing it the way I'm doing it, because from the thumbnail to this, I can, like thumbnail to sketch, I can add stuff and it's not such a big deal. Also, I'm doing it in a way that is pretty loose, because a lot of this I'm just going to scan in and make it look finished on the computer. Now, if I feel like making it look more finished like on paper here, that's fine too, because a lot of kind of the way I'm approaching it is I want to keep as much of the like sort of the hand-drawn stuff as I can. And if it's mostly just going to be hand-drawn, then that's fine too. So that's what's going on here. And the other thing is, what I mean by like not trying to make it look finished is stuff like this. I'm not going to use like a ruler on like some of these lines. I'm just gonna, because it slows me down is what I'm saying, and it may not be necessary. So I'm just gonna like loosely sketch it in. But yeah, I have to like move the paper and stuff like that. And so there's that. And then the other thing is just to kind of keep with the idea of like keeping it as a sketch, I'm just going to use a pencil to like sketch in the character and keep working on it like that. And then the main thing is to get the idea like down and like the storytelling. So these are all just different approaches and ways of getting your ideas onto the paper. And so the main thing is to not get impatient and try to move to like a finished drawing before you work out like the storytelling, before you work out the design, before you're happy with it. But what happens is if you try to finish it too quickly and on like a perfect piece of paper, or the opposite is also if you do this, part of why I'm doing this like traditionally is not just the look of it, which is a big part of it, but the other thing is if it's digital, you just fidget with it and you never know when you can kind of stop because you really could work on it some more. And what I mean is like with this panel, I'm gonna stop because I haven't overworked it, but it's like wanting to be overworked. So yeah, and then maybe later when I look at it, like I'll see some changes. Again, you could do all of this digitally. It's obviously helpful to do it that way. There are like reasons to do it traditionally, especially these days. But so the other thing I was saying is that I'm not so like, I could actually just leave this like in pencil, but I would probably ink it because part of that is like the look of it is like the hand-drawn look. So yeah, there's a lot of ideas and it's still an experiment and I'm like prototyping it and everything. And yeah, this week will be a deep dive. So, well, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to like scan in and kind of set up like my digital workspace because I haven't really done like the digital stuff in a while, and also for like comics and stuff. Yeah, be sure to ask me any questions that you might have. But yeah, that'll be it for today. I want to thank you for joining me for our daily sketching routine. And if you like these videos, please support the channel or continue to support the channel. I appreciate it. And until next time, keep on sketching.